Hi, it's Jane, and it's day 3 of 40 days of authentic power, which seems to be about expression. So I picked the card Damara again about guiding children, and I'm having a lot of seeing a lot of connections right now, and just kind of enjoying my mind melting because there's really too many to even, yeah. But I'm having fun just seeing what I do see and appreciating that I can witness it. So I was really enjoying kind of just in my personal life, noticing how I've always been the same person. Like the themes that I've looked at, they've just always been the same, even though they look very varied. It's looking back, noticing connection. Like I was thinking about how when I was 16, I had a little bumper sticker in my car that I had stolen, and it said ecstasy is a state of no mind. And I think I knew what it meant then, and I thought it was neat, but I was like 16, and the fact that it really, that's it, right? That's like to be in that state, and that I knew to go for it, even as like whatever, that somewhat kind of bratty, self-involved person that I was, and that I still am. I still have both those qualities, right? The expansive me and that petty me. There's both of those are still here, and yeah. And I remember writing this paper I took a class in university called the Metaphysics of Human Sexuality. It was like a 400 level philosophy class, but I thought, well, it's about sex, should be fun. And like the sex class that everyone was taking was always full. So anyway, it had all these prerequisites. I was a freshman, and the teacher, I said, can I take it pass fail to the teacher? And the teacher looked at me and said, what's your record like? And I was like, I do pretty well. I just never taken a philosophy class before. And he said, why don't you just take the class like regular? I find that when people do pass fail, they kind of stop showing up. Anyway, I love that professor. He's actually passed away, but his name was Professor Pash. He reminded me of Freud, the way he looked, and it was one of those things where like I didn't realize how good the class actually was until after taking years of other philosophy classes and realizing, wow, that first one was amazing. And it was about sex, but it wasn't necessarily in kind of like the juicy way I was thinking, but it was very, yeah, it looked at human nature. And anyway, for one of the papers, they were usually about like philosophical concepts, but for the last paper, he had us have the option to be able to write a story. And I didn't write creatively. Like I wrote poetry sometimes, but not like short stories but it was like the day before that it was due, and so I was gonna write it about like a philosopher, but if it was about a philosopher, it had to be like 15 pages. And so I was like, oh, I'll write a story because then it doesn't have to be that long. Anyway, I ended up writing a creation story. It was a reworking of the story of Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge, and made it into a sexual story. And yeah, that came back to me last night, and it just brought together everything that I'm looking at. I didn't know at the time like how multi-layered it was, but so this whole thing about shame and the power differential and the inner child, even I was like, why am I being led to talk about the inner child, and how does that relate to all these other things? That it's so in Genesis, it's like God spoke the world into being, and yet the idea of marriage and creation, it's not originally is meant as an act that is continuous. So just like a TV, like, or I don't know how TVs work now, but older TVs, like, it seems like it's this continuous image, but it's actually recreating the image in every moment. And that's how they say the universe actually is, right? We think it is static, but it's actually recreating itself in every moment. And so what happens is, if we see the world as this closed system, like yeah, there's this finite number of things, and if we see marriage as there's this promise that was made, and so we must stick to it, instead of then of course we're in scarcity. We have to maintain or preserve what's already here, because there's nowhere to go, no direction for it to go but down. But if we see the world the way it really is, which is it's renewing, it's renewable, it's like spring. Like spring comes when, at the height of despair, right? Completely unexpectedly, in like the dead of winter, suddenly there's spring. And yet we think it's unrealistic to believe that something can come out of nothing when it happens in nature all the fucking time. So, and then this idea that so how is it coming into being? You know, it's being sung into being. Like God is speaking, and God meaning all of us as reflections of the One. It's like this constant conversation that's being had, and that we have, and that our part in it is it needs to be expressed, and that each. So, I was listening to this rabbi, and it was so great because I was having these ideas, and then I started listening to this rabbi, and he was talking about them, and I love when shit like that connects. So he was saying how Passover, it comes from the words actually like peksat or something like that, and it means open mouth, and it's something in Exodus they talk about that this month, and it shows that it's cyclical. The story of Exodus and all that, it's not meant to be this one epoch. It's meant to signify the cycle of life, and that month is the month of miracles, and a miracle being something that's natural, but like extra natural, right? Beyond what's natural. And it's also called the month of kings, and king signifying like mastery, self-mastery, our ability to create. And the special mastery was specifically over speech, because our will to create is expressed through speech. And so even the story of Passover being all about like enslavement, it's more about liberation. Is really about the ability to express beyond like physical bondage and chains, because if we can create a reality in every moment, and there's actually no barrier to communication. Like you don't always get what you want. You can't just like pray for something and always get it, because the conversation isn't just you, it's always at least two or more parties. But you always have the freedom to communicate. You always have the freedom to express, because expression is happening as information being passed, right? So when we are limited, or that ability to express is suppressed, that is enslavement, and that is what causes debt, shame, because it comes from this idea of scarcity, that there is no, that it's not an open system, that we're not open systems, and that there's some way that our ability to express can be bound, which is an illusion. And that illusion is what has people's inner child in hiding. The inner child is the God within us, right? That speaks freely. And the inner child, it's like the original genius, right? Like, oh, so that month of Kings, it's also about saying that each being, each of us is masterful at one skill at least that cannot be transferred. That means all of us are teachers, all of us are kings. And so when you don't express that thing, which is that original genius, then the world is not complete, right? This is a thing that I keep talking about, but I love the way, that it was phrased. It's like in this ancient religious text. And what's cool is the Indian dance performance that I'm doing soon is at the Jewish Cultural Center, which I just thought was funny. I love this whole mixing of things. And I was gonna say, oh yeah, so, and that month, the King month is also, of course, it's called the Miracle Month, and it's also in the season of spring, which is all about renewal and redemption. And the redemption comes from knowing that every moment is one of renewal. And this whole topic is really important to me because, you know, when I was getting the insight that I'm meant to help people express their inner child, it's like, yeah, that's great, you know, so that people can live like more joyfully, but it seems kind of like a luxury, you know, like, do people really, are they staying awake at night thinking, I need to express my inner child? But what I'm getting is, like, we die when we don't express ourselves. Like, your body might be moving, but you're fucking dead. Like, the reason why any of our hearts are beating is because God, the source, is actually singing us into being, like, every moment. He's speaking us into being. And like Martin Luther King said something like, you know, the day that we stop speaking about the things that matter is the day that we begin to die. And it made me think of this Yoko Ono song that I'm really into. It's called I'm a Witch. You should look that up. And she says in there, yeah, when we don't say what we speak and feel, we're dying. And so just the idea that our expression is this luxury, like, you know, for artists or for, you know, people who are indulgent. It's like, if you're not expressing what's in your heart, then this world cannot be fucking repaired, because every one of us is needed. And the shame that keeps us from expressing that, the shame that comes from, like, when we were told, like, when we were young, like, directly or indirectly, like, it's not okay to cry, it's not okay to be angry, it's not okay to look in the mirror and, like, who are you thinking that you're pretty, or stop singing that song, or whatever the fuck it was, you know? That's what I'm here to heal, because that's fucking tragic. And yeah, and that's enough clarity, I think, for one day.